my name is Kyoko Imai. I am the Associate Director of the Atlantic Council's Indo-Pacific Security Initiative that's housed in the Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security. I'm delighted to have here today General Mike Minihan. He is, of course, a distinguished fellow with the Indo-Pacific Security Initiative. We're delighted to have him as part of our team. He is a retired pilot and four-star general with over 3 decades of service in the U.S. Air Force. He served as commander of the Air Mobility Command. He has also served as Deputy Commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, Chief of Staff for United Nations Command and U.S. Forces Korea, as well as Deputy Director of Operations at Pacific Air Forces. So obviously a very extensive career, and I'm sure I missed many things, but we're really excited to have him here to have this discussion about a memo that was leaked about 3 years ago now, and so delighted to hear about his thoughts on this and what's happened since then.
Yeah, it's, here it is, 2026, about almost 3 years, close to the day of when a memo, which was really an order, was leaked out of my formation and into social media and the press. The thing that I knew when I was drafting that order is that I had come into Air Mobility Command in October of 2021 with an order from my boss to go faster and get ready to fight in the Pacific. I had a pretty good sense of the capabilities of my force, as well as some data points that were very meaningful for how I overlay that with the challenge of the Pacific. So let's just say when I went in to 2023, it was a consequential year for Air Mobility Command. We were taking an exercise that we normally did over the continental United States and we shifted it into the Pacific. That alone was a pretty monumental lift for the team to do. But not only shift it in the Pacific, but do it in a way that we don't do most exercises. Most exercises we take about a month to get in place. We set everything up perfectly, and so that you can accomplish things and do things without the real frictions that would exist in a contested environment. So you get used to the time zone, you establish the relationships, you have the connectivity set up in advance, you get crew rest when you land and get time to fix the airplanes and things like that. And we intentionally decided that we were going to explode into theater and not take the time to actually get set up and get used to it. So there's a deploy phase, which is getting into theater, and then instead of taking 2 weeks to get ready to have the exercise, we went immediately into the employ phase. And so that really tested us in good ways. It's one thing to have a plan, but it's another thing to actually just go out and do it for real with no white cards, no caveats, no asterisks, just the real you, your real capability on display for the Joint Force, for China, for whoever else is watching, and for our partners and allies as well. And so it was a pretty unique shift, and that kind of framed why I issued this order.
Could you talk a little bit about what, for those that haven't had a chance to read it, what the memo entailed?
Well, I started out the memo with a line that's very close to, I hope I'm wrong, but I think we will fight in 2025, which is the reason for this conversation. Right. And I really meant it. I hope I was wrong. But it wasn't intended to be an exquisite intel brief at the highest levels of classification. But there are actions in the Pacific that China was taking. There were actions within China that Xi was taking with his leadership style. And I predicted a distracted America. I think you can argue that one probably had a lot of credibility to it. But anyways, the confluence of those three things would provide an opportunity for China to take advantage and do something nefarious. They've been clear about their intent. You don't have to interpret it. They're very clear about unification of Taiwan. And so I knew that despite working extremely hard for over a year, that we were making great progress, but I was also frustrated that we weren't making greater progress. And that we were coming up on this consequential year where we're going to do this exercise in the Pacific, and that we really needed to make sure that the message was penetrating all the way down to the lowest levels and every level of Air Mobility Command, that the urgency was there, the tension was there, and really setting the stage early in the year that we're going to do things differently this year. We're going to go faster, we're going to take more risk, And so the memo laid all that out, and there's some lines in there that if you're comfortable with the risk you're taking, you're not taking enough risk. And that the whole joint force and our partners and allies are relying on us to get this done. And so the essence is basically, it was an order, and it was putting my team on notice in a good way that these are the things we're going to do, and we're going to get after it. And it also had a whole lot of delegated authorities for the commanders beneath me to really have the authority to do what they needed to do, take action without having to ask permission, and kind of operate in a mission command style to get after what they needed to do. And then the last part had some innovative type things. There was a line in there about launching drones out of a KC-135 aircraft and being aspirational in some of the innovation and technologies that existed. So our elected officials deserve a team that's ready to dominate. The best thing we can do as commanders is be more concerned with mission and airmen than we are with our careers. And so, there's a commander responsibility to have a team that's ready to win, and that whole order was focused on that.
Could you walk us through a little bit, when the memo was leaked? There, as you said, it was viral, but it seems like there was a lot of controversy about it. There was a lot of pushback from people that said you were being too strong on China. The wording was too strong.
Yep.
So could you talk through their perspective, what you thought of the reaction to your memo?
First of all, you were gonna ask me about, why didn't you classify it secret? Well, I know that if you classify something secret, nobody will ever see it.
Right.
A very small group, and this was about penetration to the whole team. So we did classify it. We ran it through our classification process, and we classified it for official use. And whoever leaked it stripped that off and then put it on social media. But this was about penetration. Did I think it would get leaked? No. Yeah. Did I think it was provocative? Absolutely. I do think it was provocative. I knew that. But once the inside voice becomes outside, it loses context, and then the message can be hijacked by people that want to work a different agenda. And then now we're going to get back to our commander obligations. I think I have an enormous amount of priority for the National Defense Strategy, which said that China was the pacing threat and the planning challenge and execution challenge. Certainly that aligned with the National Security Strategy at the time. My boss wrote a memo, his strategy for the Air Force, accelerate, change, or lose. So it was in line with accelerating and changing so we could win. And then at the end of the day, I've got a commander obligation to mission and airmen. And to the joint force at which I'm supposed to support. And the last thing I want to do is have somebody counting on me and my team and have us not deliver.
Right.
So that's the dominating theme, I think, from this. At the end of the day, this wasn't about a calendar in 2025. I'm glad it hasn't happened in 2025.
Right.
But we've still got work to do. We've got to go faster. We're still being outpaced. I love the way Admiral Paparo says, as ready as we are, I'll never admit to being ready enough. And I would expand that to say, as ready as we are, as integrated as we are, and as agile as are, I will never admit to being ready enough, integrated enough, agile enough. That matters. And so this is tough coaching, right? Coaches that we love are actually the toughest coaches.
I agree.
So they're firm and they're fair, all right? They come from a position of love, and they want to win. So those things really, really stand out. So I want to be the coach that that adores my team and loves them so much that we're going to be firm, fair, come from a position of love, and then always drive to win, and not just win a little bit. I don't want to win by a point. I don't want to win by a last-minute field goal. I want to overwhelmingly dominate the enemy.
I was glad to hear you mention, the level of classification, because we're really honored to have people like General Minihan on our team, folks that are either currently serving or have formerly served in U.S. and also allied and partner governments and militaries, because we at the Indo-Pacific Security Initiative, our focus is specifically on war and deterrence in the Indo-Pacific. And so our work, what we like to do, our leadership, my director, who you all probably know very well, is a former U.S. National Intelligence Officer for North Korea. And so I think it's incredibly valuable to have insights from folks that were in theater, on the ground, doing exactly what you've been doing, rather than folks just staying in their lanes. I think perspectives from DC, from various theaters, is incredibly important. And so I think the work that we do is trying to, not go to the classified level, but doing as much as you can in the unclassified space, because of one of the things that the general already mentioned, but about working with allies and partners. Obviously, if you're working with allies and partners, you can't deal in the classified space, but there's a lot there that can be discussed in the unclassified space. So I guess I'd love to ask you a little bit about the allies and partners component, because I think we all recognize that things have changed drastically since this memo was leaked 3 years ago. So you mentioned the NDS, the NSS. So obviously the current NDS and NSS look quite a bit different than 3 years ago. Taiwan wasn't mentioned, and I think that's, I think that is an issue. And so would love to hear your thoughts on the current U.S. administration. There have been changes in foreign policy strategy to focus on the Western Hemisphere and kind of rethinking traditional alliances and partnerships. So what does that mean for Indo-Pacific allies and partners?
I'm proud to be a fellow here at the Atlantic Council, because all the things I cared about while I was in uniform, I still care about. I mean, I didn't, just because I took the uniform off, I didn't stop. And I didn't wait to have an opinion until I retired. So it's refreshing to be on a team that's trying to frame, our security issues in a region, an extremely consequential region. And so I'm happy for that. You mentioned Marcus's intel background. I mean, the most important thing we can do as allies, partners, joint force, any formation that fights, is see the problem and see the enemy and see the challenge the same way. I mean, that baseline appreciation is the baseline that matters most. If you don't see the problem the same way, then everything else is fractured at the top, and you'll never get that readiness, that integration, that agility that you need. Listen, 4 administrations in a row said the Pacific was the priority, okay? And I don't think that the amount of resourcing that the resourcing never followed the priority expressed in any of the national documents, okay? So it's okay. I have an economics degree, and I was told when I graduated that just because one has an economics degree does not make one an economist. So I'm not trying to be overly fancy here, but the first rule of economics is that individuals act in their own self-interest rationally, okay? So it's okay. And every country does this, whether they say it out loud or not. America first is okay. It doesn't mean America alone. It doesn't mean that partners and allies are diminished in any way. But trust me, every other country on the planet is doing things in their own self-interest, and it's okay for us to do that too. And I've been in service and in the Pacific under multiple administrations. The mill-to-mill relationships are extremely strong. I've not done politics my whole career, and I'm not going to start now. But what I am going to say is Homeland Defense has always been number one. Okay. What I am going to say is allies and partners in the treaties, especially in the Pacific, the 5 treaties that exist that tie us uniquely to that part of the world, are extremely strong and stable in very challenging environments, whether it's operationally or politically or whatever. And I think there's opportunity. We can defend forward. We're obviously, when you look at the executive orders and you look at the acquisition reform and you look at what the chairman of the Joint Chiefs Staff says on the capabilities this nation needs, that applies to near-peer adversaries. So I don't think at all we're taking our foot off the gas when it comes to our approach. I know that the sale of the F-16s to Taiwan was approved, and that's a good thing. And then there were some statements during our trip there that were very affirming. And so I believe that we still have a strong obligation towards the TRA. And I think that we will continue to develop a force that can fight and win and dominate inside the first island chain. And if you can do that, you can fight and win and dominate anywhere else on the planet.
General, you recently participated in our senior level delegation trip to Taiwan.
Loved it.
Following retirement. And so I'm curious to hear, so this memo happened in 2023.
Yes.
You visited Taipei in 2025. So what was that like going to Taiwan and kind of seeing what's happening there? Is Taiwan ready for a potential, incursion by the PRC?
Yeah, I loved it. I loved every bit of it. My opening phrase in there, and first of all, the Atlantic Council had amazing connectivity with all aspects, all the sectors in Taiwan. So we got to see the emerging technology of industry. We got to meet with the think tanks, and then we got to interact with the highest levels of government, all the ministers, the vice president. It was really a treat to be there. I came away there fired up in a good way, and I was really the diligence, the methodology, certainly. Their approaches, I think they're nuanced. I think they're sophisticated. I mean, it's they clearly understand what's at stake more than probably anybody else. And then you see that permeate to all the different sectors of society. So it's really good. But I also led off with I've been preparing my whole professional life to come here and fight. I mean, that's pretty accurate. The war plans that my unit supported. All of the operational readiness inspections we did when I was squadron and wing commanding. And essentially my memo, the reason I'm a civilian right now, was so that we could go there and fight and win. And so that's a unique perspective when you go in there. And so I am buoyed by, I didn't come in there expecting anything worse. I don't want to at all relay to that. But they're looking at the power that they need to integrate with coalition and joint forces, U.S. joint forces that come in and get after the fight. They're looking at different ways of prosecuting the fight. A lot of lessons learned from Ukraine. I don't think the scale and the tempo match there, and that's an important nuance that we have to consider. But I came away with high confidence that the leadership there is driving hard on all the right lines of action, and that the integration with the U.S. is strong and getting stronger.
I want to kind of go back to when the memo was leaked. So a question I have is, do you think that kind of undermined the, potential for diplomacy with Beijing? Or, what was kind of the impact for China? Because I'm thinking right now of the ways that Japan and Korea are kind of approaching diplomacy with China right now. And so you see Prime Minister Takaichi, who has been very strong in terms of, a potential conflict, a potential Chinese incursion on Taiwan would have implications for Japan's security, which is, a given. But then you see also, the president of South Korea, Lee Jae-myung, has been kind of trying to continue talking to Xi Jinping and kind of keep the channels of communication open.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of square that circle? How do you broach that? If there's aggressive rhetoric against China, does China does China follow that with both actions and words, or is it usually just rhetoric?
Yeah.
Would love to hear your thoughts.
It's a good question. So, I've got a couple thoughts here. We'll see if I can remember them all. I'm not a diplomat, okay? I'm in the military. Yet all the instruments of national power have to work together. The diplomatic, information, military, and economic, and if you use a different acronym, it's much broader than that, I get it. But, we have to be in concert together. Okay, so you tell me, the national defense strategy and the national security strategy say China. Your boss says, your Secretary of the Air Force says, China, China, China. Your boss says, accelerate, change, or lose. And then a commander takes action to ensure we're not going to lose. Let's not have to hold our nose because all of a sudden commanders are doing what you've asked them to do. Okay. And, I'll leave that right there. At the same time, I get it, they're all related. At the same time, I get my rank, my position comes from a different level and can creep its way into the diplomacy lanes. I 100% get that. That was a leak, okay? Let's be clear, that was a leak, okay? I wasn't standing on a corner yelling that stuff. I did the due diligence to get after what I stand by my order. Let's be clear. I stand by my order. The only thing I apologized for my order was that it leaked.
Right.
Okay, I didn't apologize for what was in it. At the same time, I realize that once the inside voice becomes outside, it can take a life of its own and it can have effects other for which it was intended. So I get that. I stood tall, took responsibility for it. And at the end of the day, the leadership, and I'm grateful for this, decided to keep me. There was probably 2 weeks where I didn't know if that was going to be true. But let's take your question and add another layer to it. Let's ensure in our actions that we're not being deterred by China because of what they might do, because they certainly aren't deterred by us in their rhetoric. They certainly aren't deterred by us in their actions across multiple domains. They have permissive environment to operate in our cyber channels. They're reckless on the seas and in the air. Here we are being deterred by what China might do while they're doing all the things. And I'm not saying bad behavior, it's bad behavior, but I'm saying when you're scared to take action because of what they might do or might say, then you're being deterred. So deterrence, 3 pillars: communicate will, deny benefit, impose a cost. All right, they're doing all 3 of those to us, and yet we kind of get queasy for some reason when we communicate will, deny benefit, impose a cost. And so I think there's some. I know this is part of the new administration. Deterrence matters, and it matters in a lot of the domains that we've kind of lost it, I believe. And so I believe the best type of strength that backs up all of the instruments of national power is the military strength. So we've got to have a credible military that can actually back up what it says it can do, and that way every other part of the instruments of national power is stronger. And we need to be reveal-oriented instead of conceal-oriented. So a lot of people say, hey, we can't let them know we've got this capability. And I agree, there's things like that exist. But for the most part, we've got to reveal. We've got to show strength. That's why we did the exercise in the Pacific. It's one thing to watch America's mobility force go pull 120,000 people out of Kabul. That's an amazing feat. But it's another thing to have hundreds of airplanes explode into your theater overnight and be on your doorstep. That is a reveal type of things. So, I come from it differently. One person's escalation is another person's deterrence. And I think strength matters, I think action matters, and I think presence matters when it comes to all that.
If you'd like to know more about this, we are delighted to have an exclusive publication that the General has written, kind of reflecting on the memo that was released in 2023 and where we are now. So please feel free to visit the Atlantic Council at atlanticcouncil.org to read more about his thoughts on this.